Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's Thursday with AARP Wisconsin Show. And Amber Miller, your host. And before we get to our guest today, just a few friendly reminders. If you're interested in learning more about AARP Wisconsin, what we're doing within the local community, and other information, please visit our website at aarp.org/WI. Please also remember the Community Connections initiative that started a few years back, but there's a couple different things that you can find on there, including volunteer opportunities within your community or volunteer opportunities that you can start yourself. And then also the AARP Friendly Voice Initiative, which is free. There's no age limit. And then also you do not need to be an AARP member, but what you could do is put a request in for yourself or for a loved one to receive a phone call from one of our AARP trained volunteers, because as we know, sometimes it's just nice to hear a friendly voice on the other end. So you can find additional information about that at the website below, which is aarpcommunityconnections.org, or by calling 1-888-281-0145. And we would love, of course, April is Volunteer Month. We're going to be talking to our guests shortly. But if you are interested in volunteering with AARP Wisconsin, you could go to the website below, which is aarp.org/I-want, 2. So I want to volunteer, for additional information on opportunities to volunteer with us, including the application, which you can complete. And then one of our staff members will get back to you. But we would love for you to join the AARP Wisconsin volunteer family. So as I just said, April is National Volunteer Month, and I know we could not do what we do within our community without our lovely volunteers. So today it's all about our volunteers, and we're going to introduce Tara Shaver, who is an AARP Advisor with Volunteer Engagement, and she is out of Nashville, because you know that's my city, and I always like to mention that. So welcome, Tara.
Hey, Amber, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Tara, can you talk a little bit just about the Office of Volunteer Engagement, which is kind of the department? Can you talk a little bit about like what they do and the importance of them?
Yeah, so I am with our National Office of Volunteer Engagement. We handle all things volunteer for our state offices. There are 53 state offices across the country. We also work with our chapters. We work with our partner organizations and in our TA and Wishful Lifetime and tax aid and driver safety, and basically all of the stuff behind the scenes that happens within AARP to support volunteers at that ground level. With what is it about volunteering? Everything from recruitment to onboarding and orientation to recognition. We're there to help support our friends and family across the association with all of that work. And then I'm on a training and development team, and we work with volunteers and the staff who work with them all across the country on things that are relevant to our work in communities and our work with some of our programs and projects that you mentioned as you were getting started this morning.
And if you're just joining us today, we're highlighting April as Volunteer Month. So we have Tara Shaver from the AARP Office of Volunteer Engagement. So if you have any questions or comments for Tara, feel free to put them below, and we'll get to them throughout the show. Tara, do you know about how many AARP volunteers we currently have throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, so we have about 60,000 AARP volunteers across the country, which is pretty incredible. And those are folks who are working in many different facets of work within AARP. As you know, we have everything from community outreach to the program you mentioned with Friendly Voice, giving folks a call just to check in and help combat isolation. Our tax aid program, which is just wrapped up about a month ago, driver education, you name it. Folks are involved in it within AARP. And even right in our Office of Volunteer Engagement, engagement, we have I think we're up to 15 teams of volunteers who work with us on everything from training and development to the work behind the scenes with administering, our training programs and helping people access our technology, Zoom and our volunteer portal and social media, just every single thing you can imagine, including, of course, advocacy and many of our communications roles that are happening also in the state and at the national level.
And if you are watching the show live or in replay, we're also, besides talking to Tara, you'll notice some pictures coming through. And these are pictures of some of our AARP Wisconsin volunteers who help us do all the goodness that we do within the community. So if you're watching this, you might recognize yourself as a volunteer, but you can see it's pretty diverse. Up in the upper left-hand corner is what we call, I'm pretty sure that's a decades dinner, where we get a group together of all different ages and just talk about certain topics. It's terrific. Outreach within the community, outreach within advocacy. So we definitely know how important volunteerism is to not just AARP, but all around. Tara, because I know you have more seniority on me, so you are definitely more familiar with, the goodness of our volunteers and what they bring. Can you talk a little bit about just the impact of volunteerism in general? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the AARP, about how important it is to our community.
Yeah. So as you know from your work, even before coming to AARP, volunteers help us do so much more than any of us individually could do. We are a large organization, but we're not as large as I think people think that we are in terms of our manpower with paid staff. And so within AARP, our state offices are relatively small. Our largest offices maybe have 30 people in them, but most offices are 5 to 7, maybe 8 people. And they're, working with hundreds of thousands of AARP members and community members in every state and in our territories. And so we rely on volunteers to help us just amplify our voice, to help us really expand our reach, to be able to do more in communities and to do more with advocacy than we could ever do by ourselves. And so AARP was founded as a volunteer organization. Our founder, Ethel Percy Andrus, was a volunteer. She never took a paycheck from AARP, and she founded the organization with other volunteers around her kitchen table. And we've really maintained that, that way of doing things. And especially in communities, we have volunteers who are organizing around their kitchen tables or around, a table at a local restaurant. And that's how they're doing their work. And they're helping us to stay in touch with what is going on, where are the opportunities for AARP to bring people together, to help be a convener on issues, and where can we really help move the needle, or where can we help with issues that maybe have come to a standstill? How can we help bring some resources to the table, including people resources, to make that happen? Again, volunteers just help us. A personal story. I know you'll love to hear that. During the pandemic, we started, we had to make a really quick pivot to start to do things virtually. And we had been doing some of that in our office because we were conducting trainings and we were testing some stuff out. So we were relatively comfortable using Zoom. And when we had to make this change, we said, gosh, we're some of the most comfortable people doing Zoom. So let's hold a couple of training sessions and, see what people need in order to feel comfortable. And we were getting a couple of hundred of people a week at these training sessions. And I said, this is not sustainable. We can't keep holding these training sessions. So I just put a call out for volunteers, and we had a handful of volunteers who stepped forward. They've been conducting weekly trainings for Zoom. They've been doing that now for almost 2 years. And we went from just being able to touch a couple of hundred people to literally over 2,000 volunteers and staff. Were trained by volunteers to use Zoom. And I could have never sustained that. My team of, colleagues, we just couldn't have sustained that operation because it really wasn't, a part of our normal job. And we're able to just carry on such an amazing impact in community when we get our volunteers involved, and we really rely on them to do the work that we do.
And it looks like, why don't we start with Reed's comment first? I will mention that Reed is a volunteer with AARP. AARP is always so appreciate of the volunteers, one of the best I've experienced in 7 decades. But I've met Reed, and I would say 3 decades, Reed. Thank you. Reed is terrific.
Oh my gosh, Reed, that makes me so happy to hear. And that is one of the things that we try to do really well, is that not only during volunteer month, which is why we're here chatting about volunteers, but all year round. And, it's customary within AARP for many of our volunteer engagement managers, people who come on board working with volunteers have often come from organizations with less resources. And it's been a struggle for them to, recognize volunteers in the ways that they would want to do. And we are, I say, when I came from state government, I felt like I'd entered the land of milk and honey, because I was able to just do so much without as much restriction as I had come from in the government sector. And so it's so wonderful to hear that from volunteers. And it's so great to be able to appreciate them, even with small tokens of gratitude and not have to stress about that. So we really, really love to hear that from you, Reed. Thank you. And thanks for volunteering.
And then we'll bring up Arlene's question. Arlene said, I heard the National Board of Directors are volunteers. Is that true?
Yes, it is. We have a volunteer board of directors, and they are also volunteers. So just like at our state level, many of our key executive volunteers are executive council members and our state president. That term is often heard, and people think that because of how amazing they are, they often think that they're staff members, but they too are volunteers.
And I do have to mention too that a lot of my volunteers, when I say my volunteers, the Milwaukee outreach team, are still working. There's people who are not yet retired, but there's so many opportunities, Tara. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, if somebody is fully retired or not fully retired, the flexibility.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. And you're right, Amber. The reason that we stopped using the Association of Retired Persons is because 50% or so of our members are still working. And we find that to also be true for our volunteers. Many of them are maybe semi-retired, or they've retired from one career and they're doing consulting, or they're doing contract work, or maybe they're just doing something else that's totally different because they enjoy it. And so we have so many ways for volunteers to be involved at, as their schedule permits. So we have things that are happening behind the scenes that really are able to be done at pretty much any time of the day. And then we, of course, have, volunteers who have flexible schedules. They have the ability to be able to set up, with some of the things that are happening during business hours because they have a heads up about it. But the kinds of volunteer opportunities that we have are available. You started out with one of our popular ones, the Friendly Voice, which is something that folks can do on their own time. They can dial into that system and make phone calls when it's convenient for them. We have digital fraud fighters. These are people who are helping spread the word about our fraud education materials and scams that are currently being seen across the country. We have folks who are working to also help veterans and their family members understand benefits and know what resources are out there for them. And then we have so much of the work that's happening in states and communities that's happening at night or on the weekends. Then, the world is opening back up. We're having community events again. People are getting excited to go out to festivals and whatnot. And so we have those opportunities as well. We have speakers bureaus in many places. I think you guys have an active speakers team. And then much of our advocacy, even, spreading the word to organizations with community outreach about the resources that AARP has available and about, the work that we are doing. Those things can all be done at your leisure. And we just appreciate people so much when they are also making time to volunteer with AARP when they are working, because we know that time is even more limited for them. And so for them to spend time with us is a really big deal. So,
and Tara, I can only speak for some of the volunteers obviously I have met, but I do want to echo something that you said, that are, a lot of the state offices. We have a lean and mean team. We have I think we have 8 staff members. So when you think about 8 staff members for one whole state, we love the volunteers, because then we can even make more of an impact, obviously, within communities that maybe we're not close to. If somebody's watching this right now thinking maybe they're retired, semi-retired, or looking for volunteer opportunities, but they don't know where they fit in because they have such a diverse skill set, whatever that means. What advice would you give to them if they don't know where maybe to start?
Yeah. And this can be so overwhelming because we are so deep and wide and so many things. We've been around for so long that we've really, and we're involved in so many issues that are really pulling at people's heartstrings because of their personal experiences. The thing that I tell folks to do is to shop around, get to know some of the staff or volunteers that are working with AARP and ask them what's going on. Tune in to stuff like this that's happening on Facebook, or, if you see an event or activity that's happening, kind of get a feel for how things are done or what kinds of things are done. And then just jump in somewhere. It's like, if you wait forever to find the perfect fit, you won't get started because we just have so much that's happening. But when you take a look at it all and say, okay, here's a really easy way for me to step in, and something like this, for example, we might have somebody monitoring chat, right? Somebody is helping take a look at the chat. Even maybe later, they're making sure that the staff, if it's a staff can answer the question only or something like that, that we are maybe getting flagged or tagged so that comment doesn't get missed as people are watching the replay. There are so many ways that people can, we call it just, kind of dipping your toe in the water or taking a really easy entry role, going to attend a virtual session and helping behind the scenes with, maybe they're sharing the PowerPoint, maybe they're chatting with people as the meeting is getting started. They don't have to know everything about AARP to get started with us. And especially if you have a diverse skill set, I think once you start doing things and you start talking to other volunteers, you'll see other opportunities where you'll say, okay, I feel really fulfilled in what I've done for the last little bit, and now I'd like to try something new. And even volunteers who've been with us for 10 years are still finding new ways to get involved with AARP and new ways to share their skills. And they're often inviting other volunteers to come along with them, and then they'll pass the torch and they'll move on to something else. So just, tell someone, hey, I want to get right in there and get started, see how things are going. And by attending some of our sessions that are led by other volunteers, we find that people learn about things that are happening. And sometimes they're doing something that seems as simple as chatting with someone in another office, and they're bringing it back to somebody like you, Amber. You're like, I'm caught up in all of the stuff of AARP that I have to do daily. And a volunteer may chat with a volunteer in another state, and they come back and they go, did you know that Florida is doing XYZ? And that's so similar to what we've been thinking about doing. Hey, here's all the stuff. We don't have to create it from scratch. And then
Correct.
Oh my gosh.
Correct. And another thing too, Tara, is I know we in Wisconsin, we have a couple volunteers that actually kind of cross-pollinate between outreach and advocacy. If you talk a little bit about that and how it's actually pretty common.
Yeah. So we have volunteers, like you said, who are, especially within a state office, like they get involved in there's no wrong door. You come in wherever you come in and you find out what's going on, and you're going to get asked to do a lot of things. And the beauty of being a volunteer is you can always say no, which is so wonderful. Yes. But for people to come in, sometimes they come into advocacy because they're passionate about an issue like caregiving, for example, and then they learn what's happening in their local community and they want to get involved with that. And maybe they're out doing a walk audit in their community to help improve the streets and the sidewalks and the safety, and provide recommendations for how those things can be made more enjoyable by everyone, not just by our people who are 50 or older. And so it's very common that once folks step in, even sometimes with something like a tax aid or driver safety program, then they learn what we're doing and they say, oh, we want to get involved in that. And that's the same thing that's happened within our national volunteer teams as well. We've had people who said, I stepped in the state office. I then saw what was happening with some of the national teams, and I wanted to get involved in that. And the richness and the way that it has just propelled us forward for that cross-pollination to happen is something we could have never made. We couldn't have forced it, right? We could have never forced that to happen, and to bring us such diversity in ideas and in participation, from geography to cultural diversity. All of these things come into play when we start working across different programs and different even state lines.
And Tara, if somebody's looking for more information on how to volunteer with AARP, is there any other website or information that you would guide them to besides the I Want to Volunteer website?
Yeah, so on aarp.org, and I think you're directing right to our it's just the landing page for volunteerism. You can read some stories of volunteers. You can browse the kinds of opportunities that are there, not only in Wisconsin, but maybe even across the country, and get a great idea about the stuff that's going on. If you happen to be, I know you have the snowbirds in your state, so there are also, we have people, believe it or not, I know you'll believe it, but we have people who volunteer, part of the year in one state and the other part of the year in another state. So if you're like, hey, I go escape the winters and go to Florida, then check out the website of the state that you may be curious about. So just it's aarp.org/ the state abbreviation, just the 2-letter abbreviation. And you can just browse also, like, what is the state up to? What kinds of things are going on? Everything from events and activities, to the advocacy, the legislative process, and monitoring bills and things of that nature. All of those things are items that are touched by volunteers in every state across the country. So you can see what kinds of things are going on. And just like I said, just reach out to the staff, reach out to a volunteer if you see them in community or you see them posting on Facebook, and say, hey, pull me in. I'd love to get involved.
And Tara, I have one question and then one more comment for you before we start wrapping up the show. I've heard that, so people under the age of 50 have connected with me asking if they can volunteer at AARP. Is there any age guidelines at all to volunteer with us?
No, we have people of all ages who volunteer. If they're under 18, we do ask that they have the permission of a parent or guardian. And typically, depending on the activity, that parent or guardian is there with them. But it's really common for our volunteers to bring grandchildren to volunteer with them in our communities. And it's such a great way for them to learn about all of the work and the skill sets that their loved ones have as they come out and do that. But there are no requirements to even be an AARP member. So that is often a misconception, that people think that they have to be over 50 or that they have to be an AARP volunteer. And we don't require either one of those things in order to volunteer with us.
Or do you mean AARP member?
Yes, sorry, did I say volunteer? Yes.
You did, but that's okay.
Member.
That's okay. No,
we would like for you to, if you're going to volunteer, we'd like for you to admit that you're volunteering.
Okay. Yeah, please don't keep it a secret. Tara, my last kind of question would be, April is Volunteer Month. That's obviously, we love our volunteers every day of the year, not just, 1 month. But can you just say some last words about how the importance of our volunteers to AARP?
Yeah, I say almost every day, I do not know what I would do without our volunteers. And I have volunteers that help us with things that are, sometimes the unpleasant tasks, and they find great joy in them, staying very organized and, and the process kinds of stuff, to folks who are doing very public facing things with AARP. We would just never be able to make the impact that we are making without our volunteers. And I find that typically the volunteers do it way better than we would do it, because they're also passionate and have the time to devote to that thing that they're working on. When we're juggling many balls and sometimes asked to do so many things, and we want to do them all well, but sometimes we have to say good is good enough. And there is a project I'm helping out with today, because our 2 volunteers are on vacation. So they had to ask a staff member to help them because they're running a program today. It was this wish list item that I'd had for years, since I was a state office person in Tennessee. And this volunteer team came to me and said, we have an idea and we want to pitch it to you. Their pitch blew me away, because they had been able to really devote the time and energy and their enthusiasm to thinking out this idea and making it just amazing. And so our volunteers are also teaching us something. They're bringing us forward with technology. They're helping us, kind of fight old stereotypes sometimes about the way that people want to engage with us. And we're hearing it, right from the horse's mouth saying, hey, we're volunteers, we're members, and we want to be connected with it this way. So they are just doing such amazing things and helping us as individuals and as an organization. And I know we've talked about this on the side. It's like our work with volunteers also helps us as staff. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like work, right? It's like, yes, thank you, Reed. It is fun.
100%.
It's like there are days that I'm like, did I work today? I mean, I think I did. We did a lot of stuff, but it's just helps make it so much more enjoyable, and just the richness that it adds to to what we get paid to do is pretty incredible.
Well, Tara, first of all, I always enjoy talking with you the dog. Yeah, the dog scared her. He wants to be in the limelight too. It's always a joy to talk to you on a personal level and as a coworker. So we want to thank you so much for joining us for today and celebrating National Volunteer Month. And Tom Bolton said, AARP really treats me as a valued partner. I love volunteering with AARP. Thank you, Tom. And Tara probably would. Okay, Tara's got her crew now.
Yeah.
She's got her fan club near her. So Tara, thank you as always. We so appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to coming to see y'all soon.
Please do. Or we'll come and see you.
Yeah. Let's do a trip. Let's do both. Okay.
We're gonna do it. Bye, my dear. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. And as always, if you are watching this in replay, please share this video on social media, especially if you know of anybody who would like to join our volunteer family. So there are some upcoming events that might be of interest to you. So, I'm really excited. Yes, I've been counting this down tonight. Debbie Gibson. So if you want to relive the 80s, maybe part of the 90s, not sure, please look more into registering for that tonight. I would sing Electric Youth, but I don't want to scare anybody off. Tuesday, May 3rd, flower arrangement. Wednesday, May 4th, Star Wars, Jaws, and Jurassic Park. So this is a lecture about the music of John Williams. Friday, May 6th, movies for grown-ups, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's another good, I think, 80s movie. Wednesday, May 11th, Fraud Watch Wednesdays, all about Medicare fraud. You can find additional information or to register at the website and the phone number below. Please remember Small Dollar Big Impact. That is a monthly grant up to $1,000 that we award to local nonprofits, municipalities, and similar who have a really great, fun, out-of-the-box idea on ways that they can impact their community. The next application is due May 17th if you would like additional information or to apply. And you can also see past winners. Please go to the website below, which is aarp.org/WI and then SDBI. Which stands for Small Dollar Big Impact. So for next week's show, we're going to talk about the AARP Livability Index. And if you have not heard about it, this might be of great interest to you. It just got revamped and re-released. So you can actually find information about your community and area, talking about walkability, transportation, housing, all this good stuff. So we're going to have our friend from the AARP National Office to come on and talk about that. So you can meet us back here next Thursday, May 5th at noon. And I just want to say also just a huge thank you once again to all of our volunteers throughout Wisconsin and throughout the U.S. who make sure that we could do as much impact as we can in the community. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of our AARP family. And once again, if you're interested in joining the AARP Wisconsin family, you could just go to the AARP Wisconsin website. But these right here are just a couple highlights of all the greatness that our volunteers do. So we want to thank you guys so much. And we want to thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. And until then, be safe.